Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I decided this week I wanted to do a random art review on products that I haven't opened yet. So here I have the Pearlescence Color Fine Tech watercolor, and I also have my Hanamula sketchbook. This is my go-to Hanamula sketchbook. I love this thing. And here is the watercolor palette. I absolutely love the vibrancy of these colors in this pan. However, stay tuned to see what I really think of each of these colors. In preparation for today's swatching, I grabbed some of my watercolor brushes, and today's brushes are the Princeton Neptune, my go-to watercolor brushes. I really love these brushes. They're pretty pricey, but worth it. And I also go to a brand new brush that I've been dying to get, my Royal Langnickel Quail brush, and it's sort of like a mop, a more old school way of making brushes. So it's brand new and I have to clean off the starch from the brush. I love big mop like brushes. There's my dog off to the side sniffing me. He is my toughest critic. But yeah, back to this brush. I clean off the starch to get it going, and I also review another product in this video, so stay tuned for my thoughts on it. Some things that I like to prepare for sketchbooking while I'm just mindfully or mindlessly, depending on how you feel that day. I grab my cloth and, of course, my paint that I'm going to use and my brushes. I've also been really good at keeping 2 containers of water. I don't have one here per se, but I do see my bucket off to the side. I have that as a backup. So I always suggest having 2 buckets of water or containers of water, especially when you're dealing with iridescent types of paint. You'll see later on in the video that it releases sort of a glitter. And if you don't have a separate water for these glitter type paints, you may contaminate your other paints. If you don't want those to be glittery, just keep that in mind. So first impressions, the paint is much tougher than what I'm used to. I use a lot of Daniel Smith, a lot of goopy type of paints, even when they're re-wet. So this paint is very typical of a pan paint that is already been poured and set for a really long time. So I'd be curious to see if I leave a good amount of water, will it get goopy? I did not experience that while using these, but maybe it's just the combination of the binding and the pigments. So I'm not too sure if they eventually get goopy. However, that very first swatch was very deceiving. It's very purple in the pan, and when I swatched it, it looks gray at one angle and it is very purple at another angle. So this is so much fun to me, and most of the colors are pretty accurate to what you see in the pan, but depending on the reflection, you'll see various types of color. So far, this top row of colors are very transparent. I expected much more pigment to be released. Again, I'm not sure if I should have left the water on the pans for a little bit longer or if this is just how they really are. I do plan on creating a painting with these iridescent colors. I do love the black in this pan in particular, mainly because it is very shiny, but it also gives a matte quality. You'll see once it dries that there are some matte tendencies to this black color. And that last gray color was actually really blue in some light, like more like a teal. And then it would reflect a brown color at some tilts. Um, but overall, that top row was pretty muted. Um, the silver in that top row was much more blue again. And actually, now that I see here, the teal that you see in the third one is the color that you see in the last swatch. So you can see most of those fragments of color come through in the last swatch of that sort of gray brown color. This bottom row was very impressive. I liked the gold the most out of the entire pan, of course. They were the most saturated, and that was what actually sold me on getting this pan. So when I was shopping for iridescent colors, I saw a pan that was on clearance, and I won't say their name, but when I opened the brand new package of iridescent colors tube, they were missing a tube, and I was really disappointed because I was so excited. I paid all this money, paint is not cheap, and I was really sad to see that it was missing. So I went back to Blick and I returned it for this pan. So that's a quick story time. But you just saw the water and how fun and sparkly it is. Yeah, the iridescent glitter does transfer into the water. So I would be mindful of having a separate water container for your paints. Personally, I don't mind contaminating different types of paint. But if it bothers you, just keep that in mind. So we're on the last color here, and you can see how saturated these colors are. And now that I'm doing this voiceover, it makes me think the bottom row actually had water on it longer. So that could be the reason why they look more saturated. So I'm super excited to actually use these again in a painting. Sometimes swatches don't give you a full experience until you're able to use them in a painting. Another thing I like to do when swatching out my paints, which I don't film very often, but I like to do swatches when I get a new sketchbook and that first page gets really scary. I just do a bunch of swatches on these first couple pages. So, along with making square or circle or whatever shape you decide to do your swatch in, I definitely suggest making lines and using a brush that you would typically use for line making. You can even add like sort of a wavy splotch. I don't know what it would be called, but this helps to see the paint in a different nature because it is a little unnatural to paint a perfect square when you're naturally painting. Sometimes you end up with bigger blobs of paint in certain areas, so I think doing the little blob tends to help. So the name of these colors are so fun. They remind me of gems, and if any of you out there are a fan of Steven Universe, you'll know some of these names. So the first name is Amethyst. The second one is Sapphire Blue. The third one is Caribbean Green. The next one is Blue Silver. The black one is Deep Black. And the last one on that top row is Mystic Color. On the bottom row, we have Pearl Silver, such a beautiful color, Pearl Gold, Crystal Gold, Orange Copper, probably my second favorite color, Red, and Purple. That's interesting that that last one is called purple because the first one is technically purple. But I guess now looking back at it, amethyst makes sense for that first purple because the way an amethyst reflects, it does tend to have like a gray reflection to it. But I think they did a good job at naming these. I always think it's so fun to hear the names of colors and how they come up with things. But so far, my experience on this paint is excellent. I really love the pigment. I love the different ways you can create the opacity and the transparency. Of course, some of the pans have more pigment than others, but this is definitely a great pan to use for addition to any type of painting that you're working on that happens to be watercolor. You can add a little pop of color with this sparkly iridescent pan. next we have the cray-pas Junior Artist Oil Pastels. These things are so chunky. I've been dying to get the Sennelier Oil Pastel. I don't know why I said it like that. Sennelier Oil Pastel, but the large ones, they're so yummy. I love when art products are like just creamy and smooth. Again, here I am impressed by the glistening water, but I don't clearly need water for the oil pastels. But yeah, creamy smooth oil pastels are so fun. I really enjoy adding oil pastels to my paintings, whether that is a mixed media or a watercolor or something that is water based. Of course, you want to make sure that it is water based, or it could be oil based also. So if you do happen to have oil first, you definitely do not want to add water based mediums on top of that. And for obvious reasons, oil and water don't mix well. So if you start off with oil, you will have to continue with oil. But if you start off with acrylic or water-based mediums, you can add oil on top. I don't know how that works, but it just is. And I was actually doing a study for myself just to see what happens if I had oil down first and then add water-based mediums on top. And as soon as I added I think it was acrylic inks, as soon as I added acrylic inks and let it dry, things were peeling up. It peeled right up as if it were like a washi tape or something. So yeah, understanding the science between the water and oil mixing, just make sure water's on the bottom and oil is on top, never the other way around. So as we get deeper into the oil pastel review, I think that these are very kid friendly. Obviously, they are meant for kids, junior artists. They're very fun. They are full of binder, and it's very evident. Some of the pigment is a little bit dull. You can see that it almost looks like a crayon more than it does an oil pastel. I think it does a better job at being treated like a crayon. So you can see that I do the circle swatch, which was absolutely satisfying. And then I do that little sort of crayon-like swatch right next to the circle. That was the best performance for these crayons. So tilting things on the side and kind of continuously coloring it. The lines were okay. I thought that maybe because it's bigger and flat that you would be able to make crisp, clean lines. However, that wasn't the case. They're still very messy, but again, it depends on how you want to use your art products. I think that this is an art product that I would use for getting out of an art rut, having fun, exploring mixed media, or just sharing with your kid friends, your kid art friends, or nieces and nephews, daughters and sons, or whoever you have. So these are the two products that I reviewed, and I really do hope that you've enjoyed this little random art supply review. So stay tuned for the next video, and of course, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.